I'm going to talk today about a version of the Oresteia, which was filmed for television in 1983, directed by Peter Hall, and it's all available on YouTube. And I will link to all of it in the description down below. So I actually found out that this thing existed when I was searching for an image to put on my thumbnail for one of my previous videos. I've been reading through the Oresteia from this collection here of classical tragedy, Greek and Roman. And the Oresteia they have is translated by Tony Harrison. And I was looking for a thumbnail of the an image of the Tony Harrison translation to put on my thumbnail for my review of the Oresteia. And while searching for that, I came across the IMDb page for this televised version, and I didn't know that it had been filmed for television. But I clicked a few links, and I very quickly found out it was on YouTube. And it was the translation by Tony Harrison. So it was a translation that I had just gotten done reading. And so I thought to myself, well, since this is the exact same translation I just read, the exact same words and everything, might be interesting to just listen to a bit of it, see how it sounds, see how it is actually staged in a production. And I watched a bit of it, and then I thought to myself, then I very quickly realized, it would be a better way to put it, I very quickly realized I'm going to have to watch the whole thing. Because the parts I watched were very dramatic. They made me realize just how enthralling it can be to see this play actually staged. It transformed it from something that was a little bit dull and boring on the stage to something where you could really hear the drama in the actors' voices. And so I made that my viewing project. So there are three different plays in the Oresteia. There's the Agamemnon, the libation bearers, and the Eumenides, or the Furies. They're all available on YouTube from the Peter Hall adaptation. Now, apparently, they were all aired on Channel 4 in Britain in 1983, and I think all aired in one afternoon. So it's like 5.5 hours together because it's three different plays forming one trilogy. And in my previous video, I expressed some some questioning about how this was actually supposed to be performed. But I am now under the impression that it's all supposed to be performed in one afternoon. And I guess that's the way it would have been performed in ancient Greece. So there was a festival, you were there at the festival for the whole day, and you watched the whole trilogy of plays in one afternoon. And I guess that apparently was a standard thing to do in ancient Greece. Um, just just watch the whole trilogy of plays. And unfortunately, most of these trilogies no longer survive to us. I think the Oresteia is the only intact trilogy that we have now. But apparently, most of these plays were performed in trilogies. Anyways, 5.5 hours that was aired on Channel 4 in Britain in 1983. And then there was also an hour-long documentary on the production process. And initially I thought, okay, I'll watch the 5.5 hours of the actual play, but I'm not going to watch the documentary. But then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, in for a penny, in for a pound. If I'm going to watch this thing, I may as well get the whole experience. So I watched the hour-long documentary as well, which is also available on YouTube. And again, I'll link in the description to everything I've mentioned. There are actually several versions of this on YouTube. I watched a version by somebody who had put up subtitles because I think subtitles were helpful to have. Uh, so they helped to focus my attention on the words. Most of the time, the words were clear, but the subtitles, having the words there, just helps to focus your attention when it's important dialogue. And then sometimes when the chorus is chanting, I think if I didn't have the subtitles, I may have struggled to decipher some of it. Now, granted, I just read this, and I just read this in exactly the same translation, so I probably could have used that memory to help me fill in the gaps. But the subtitles were nice to have. There are a few different versions, though, and I should pass along the caveat that the version I listened to with the subtitles, the second play, The Libation Bearers, is a little bit staticky. I think there are other versions on YouTube which don't have the static, so you can find which version you like, but I'll link to it in the description all down below. So, some background on this. What I've been able to gather by watching that documentary, the 1 hour documentary, and also Google searching and reading Wikipedia, etc. So this adaptation by Peter Hall was first performed in London in 1981. And if you search Google, you can find reviews of the London performance in 1981. There's a New York Times review of it, which you can read online if you search it. Now, I don't know. Maybe I'm not part of the theater world. I mean, I'm definitely not part of the theater world. Maybe that's part of what's causing this disconnect. I thought it was a little bit strange to have like a New York Times review a London stage production. So, somebody in New York isn't going to be able to see the stage production in London, right? And considering the New York Times is read all over America, somebody in the middle of Chicago definitely isn't going to be able to benefit from seeing the stage play that's done in London. It just seems a little bit strange to give a global review to a play that's only being performed locally, but maybe that's the way they do it in the theaters. Or I don't know if things have changed since 1981. Do they still do this? I mean, not nowadays. Everybody would be filming it with their cell phones anyway, so it would be all over the internet. But anyways, the 1981 production seemed to have made a splash at the time. It has a few reviews still available that you can Google and stuff like that. And then this 1981 production eventually became the 1983 production, where it was performed at the ancient Greek theater of, where is this? Epidaurus. And apparently this was a landmark at the time. It was the first English language production of an ancient Greek play to be performed at this ancient Greek theater in Epidaurus. So, a milestone at the time. And this is the version that got filmed and was subsequently put on television in Britain on Channel 4 in 1983, along with that 1 hour documentary explaining it. It's, yeah. They make a few interesting choices, or maybe traditional would be the better word, but extremely traditional choices. They do an all male cast, so even the women characters are played by men. Now, this is partly, one suspects, because of authenticity. So that's what the ancient Greeks did. Now, the ancient Greeks, I think, did this because of a prejudice against women performing. But be that as it may, that was the tradition in ancient Greece. So they're in an effort to stay authentic, they're using that tradition. The other thing they're doing is all the characters are wearing masks, which again was a tradition in ancient Greece. So they're, in some aspects, really trying to be authentic. Now, what's interesting is if you watch the 1 hour documentary, which accompanies this, they give justifications for these choices which go beyond just being traditional. So, and it's interesting. The guy says in an interview, if you look at all the ancient plays, not just ancient Greek, but ancient China, ancient Japan, ancient Mexico, they all wear masks. All across the ancient world, theater was associated with masks. And he said, why is this? He says it's because the emotions associated with the play are just so strong that if you were to try to emote these emotions using your facial expressions, you'd just be in hysteria for the whole 90 minutes. He says, obviously, that's unsustainable. So the masks are a way of cloaking the faces so you can just focus on the language that's being used and not get caught up in all these emotions. And I thought that was an interesting take. I'm obviously paraphrasing him somewhat. I mean, it also occurs to me, though, that if that's actually true, if it's impossible to do this play without masks, without devolving into hysteria, then it should be impossible to do this play without masks, right? And yet, there are any number of other theater groups that have done it without masks. I've not actually seen them. I'm new to this. This is my first time watching the Oresteia, but I know they're out there, so it must be possible. The thing with the women, so he talks about this a little bit in the 1 hour documentary, and I actually found it a little bit difficult to parse exactly what he was saying. But I think what he was trying to say is the masks are meant to anonymize the actors. So you're not actually getting the performance of like a famous actor. You're just getting the performance of a masked figure, and all the characters are in masks, so they're all kind of equal. And he said they initially tried it with a mixed gender cast, and they found that despite wearing the masks, there were differences in the males and the females. You could tell who was a woman and who was a male. I don't know, the way they carried themselves, or I don't know. So he said in order to make everybody equal, we decided to go with all one gender. So both of those choices are given defenses, or they're given independent explanations of why they arrived at that. But they are also the traditional ways the play was first performed. I've seen people on the internet criticize these decisions. Some commenter on IMDb said, yeah, it's a shame that they went with an all-male cast. There are some good roles here that could have gone to female actors and maybe could have been played well by female actors. And maybe it would have been nice to see the characters' faces, etc. And yeah, I get that. To my mind, it doesn't hurt anything that this thing exists. Like maybe a version of the Oresteia with women actors would actually be better. I mean, it wouldn't be traditional, but that tradition of not letting women up on the stage was kind of a sexist tradition anyways, right? So get rid of that old tradition, put women in these roles. Maybe it would actually be better. But you can still go ahead and do that version. And then you still have this more traditional version by the all-male cast with the masks. And you can have both versions existing in the same world. That being said, I'm not aware of another version of this play which is I mean, there are tons of versions of this play on YouTube done by like local theater groups that somebody filmed. I'm not aware of another professional quality version of this play where it was filmed like for a mass media audience. Um, but somebody let me know if I'm missing something. And also, if it doesn't exist, then there's nothing stopping from somebody from creating it. Sorry, let me. I just watched that Steve Donahue video where he talks about like the 10 Commandments of BookTube, and one of Steve's pet peeves is people drinking during their BookTube videos. But you'll just have to forgive me. Sometimes my throat gets dry, and I need to drink something. I, I I wish I could talk without the occasional drink of water, but we're not all built like that, huh? Anyways, um, this version uses the Tony Harrison translation, which I just completed reading in print form. And it looks like, from what I've been able to glean, both from that 1 hour documentary and various research on YouTube, that this production is very closely associated with that Tony Harrison translation. And the Tony Harrison translation in here is copyrighted as 1982, so like a year after the stage play. So I think Tony Harrison maybe created this translation for the Peter Hall production, or they were working very closely at any rate. And this appears to be, excuse me, the first foray into the world that this Tony Harrison translation has had. So when you read a lot of the critics of both the televised version and the original 1981 stage play version, they're commenting on the Tony Harrison language. The New York Times was a little bit critical of the Tony Harrison translation. They said it's like somebody mixed the author of Beowulf with a beat poet. So Tony Harrison uses these kind of made up compound words that kind of sound like Old English, although I think they're made up compounds, like blood bond, bloodkin, she god, she child, he child, godstone. They kind of have this kind of Old English sound. But then, especially during the dialogues, and especially during the dialogues with the chorus, it goes into this rhyming rhythm. And I've talked about that when I've been reviewing the print version of this. And the New York Times review, this is the review of the 1981 stage play, said, you get this sense of, yeah, like this cheap beat poet, but you don't get an impression that of how great Aeschylus's style was from this. And they said this was a style so great that the other Greek playwrights afterwards lauded it and copied it. Now, unfortunately, I've never learned Greek. One of my minor regrets in life, I actually went into college as a classics major. So had I stayed on that track, I would have learned Greek. I did learn some Latin, but then I changed majors to a history major before I ever got around to learning Greek. And at this point in my life, I'm busy enough with other stuff that it's not a priority for me. So I'm will never read the original Greek, or at least not anytime soon. And I'll just have to take the New York Times review that the original Greek has a great style. A lot of other people, though, were more complimentary of the translation, and said it really makes it come alive a lot, and the rhythm and the drama really bring home the emotion of the play. I certainly, I don't know. I really am in no position to comment because this is the first and only translation I've read. I should read a few other translations before I give a judgment on it. But certainly watching the stage play, I thought it worked in conveying a certain feeling and a certain emotion. Now, I'm not sure whether a different direction would have been superior, but I think it was definitely working on some level. It was they were trying to do something and they were doing it. If that makes sense, they wanted to have this rhythmic flow, and they definitely had that rhythmic flow, and it worked more or less. There were a couple lines where the rhyme felt a little bit forced or a little bit cheesy, or where the focus on getting the rhyme and the rhythm was a distraction. But for my money, only a couple times. Most of the time, the rhyme and the rhythm seem to service the emotions and the story well in this. Um, of the three plays, my favorite by far was the first one, Agamemnon, which is the first play that opens it. Um, and this is where I really got hooked on it because initially, like I said, I wasn't even sure I wanted to watch this whole thing. I mean, I just got done reading it. Don't make me watch it. I'm trying to catch up on my ancient classics, but if I and I was thinking, I want to make progress in this classical tragedy Greek and Roman book, and if I get distracted watching adaptations of everything I read, then I'm never going to finish this book. Those were reasons why I was reluctant to watch it, but yeah, I started watching it, and that first play, the Agamemnon, is good. The emotions are very strong in it. Um, in particular, the two women characters, who are of course played by men in this version, but they don't have harsh masculine voices. They are assuming neutral voices. They're not going into a falsetto or anything like that, but they're relatively neutral voices, and they have the mask covering them, so you can't actually see that it's a man. Um, and the immersion of the experience is such, for me at least, that I was able to, at least for stretches, completely forget it was a man playing it, and just get immersed in the drama of this character. The Cassandra character, who knows that she's going to her doom. So she can see the future and she knows what's going to happen. Um, she has this rather hysteric breakdown before she goes to her doom, where she's bemoaning her fate and ranting about why am I here? Why am I being mocked by the gods? I want to throw off these honors that Agamemnon has put on to me, and the chorus is sympathizing with her, and that's a very dramatic scene, and it's something I did not fully appreciate when I was reading the print version of it, but when you can see it on stage and when you can feel the emotion and the actor gives it a lot of emotion, and but in addition to the actor giving a lot of emotion, the dialogue with the chorus and just the rhythm of it, again, the beats just makes it feel so intense. And then Clytemnestra, the guy who's playing Clytemnestra is brilliant. And after she kills Agamemnon, and she's giving the speech justifying what she's done and talking about her mother's anguish for her daughter that Agamemnon had killed, and how she this is a justified revenge to her. That again, that emotion and that power that the actor enthuses into it was really good. And then at the end, there's Clytemnestra and Aeschylus, her lover, get into this confrontation with the chorus, the chorus of the old men of Argos. And that scene is really well done. And the music, I forgot to mention, they designed music especially for this version of the play. It's mostly just kind of drum beats, which I guess the drum beat things kind of lend a little bit more credence to the New York Times accusation that this is kind of like Beowulf mixed with a beat poet, with some, but it works. That New York Times snipe aside, and there's some I don't know, woodwinds or flute type instruments as well that occasionally will pierce it, but it's just a lot of beating sounds. But yeah, that music and that drama really make that first play, the Agamemnon, very powerful. So I watched that and I had like chills down my spine. I thought, I am so glad I made the decision to watch this trilogy. This is awesome. And it's really neat when you get caught up in something like that, and you can appreciate, this play is 2,500 years old, and yet I can see why the ancient Athenians like this stuff. You get caught up in this, and you think, okay, despite the distance of time and geography separating me from the original audience, I get it. I get why this is interesting and dramatic. Now, unfortunately, in my opinion, that's the high point. The first play, Agamemnon, and then it goes down from there. Not that it gets terrible, but it's just that we never get back to those heights again. Now, again, I've been reading some reviews, and I read one review on archive.org, and I'll try and remember to link to all this stuff I'm mentioning. Read one review of archive.org that actually their reviewer thought the opposite. They said, whoever this guy was, they said normally Agamemnon is like the best play in the trilogy, but they said in this play, Peter Hall's version is actually the libation bearers that really shine. Now, I don't know, maybe the stage play, the energy was a little bit different than the televised version. I don't know. But assuming the televised version and the stage play, both directed by Peter Hall, and I think both with the same cast, assuming not too much has changed, I don't know. I hate to disagree with the experts, but for my money, that first one, the Agamemnon play, was really the highlight. The next two plays were not terrible. And in the third play, the one with the Furies, there were some scenes there that I don't know how authentic this is to the ancient Greek, but there are some scenes where the Furies are just kind of giving like this rhythmic chant, which is describing how they're tormenting Orestes. And as they're doing it, they're doing this rhythmic swaying back and forth. And Orestes is kind of falling under them and getting passed around by him. And you kind of, that visualization and that rhythmic chant, much more than on the printed page, really shows you how it's meant to be showing the psychological torture that they're giving him, which did not, at least to me, that did not come through on the printed page as much. So that element of it I appreciated seeing performed. But I do have to admit that for the second and the third play, I was not as gripped as the first play, and I had a hard time sitting through them, and I was kind of getting a little bit antsy in my seat, and pausing it and taking breaks and stuff like that. And as with most of you, my attention span has been ruined by social media and the internet and television and all this stuff. So, take me with a grain of salt. Maybe someone with a better attention span could do better. At the same time, because I know that my attention span has been ruined by all this stuff, I do view it as a useful exercise to force myself to sit through this. And so I'm glad I don't view it as wasted time. And even though the second and the third play I did to some degree, I did to some degree just have to force myself to sit through it. Not that it was absolutely terrible, but it just wasn't as enthralling. But I'm really glad I watched the whole thing. And I know that's slowing down my pace on this book to take a break to watch those adaptations. But I mean, it's like everyone always says. I think anytime you're taking a Shakespeare class or any kind of drama class, I always say it's worth it to see the adaptations, to see how the actors interpret this and see how it could be staged or performed. Some lines of dialogue that you would just pass over or not think about when you're reading it strike you a lot more when you see it performed. And definitely that was the case for me. So I'm glad I did that. I think what I may do going forward with this book is anytime can find a professionally done adaptation, like filmed for a TV or filmed for a proper movie version of any of these plays, I might again pause my reading and watch those. I don't think I'm going to find it with all of them. So the next one up on the docket is Prometheus Bound, also by Aeschylus. And I was looking for this on YouTube, and there are some community theater versions of it on YouTube, but no professional version of it freely available on YouTube. So Prometheus Bound, I guess I'll just skip, but I'll skip watching the adaptation. But anytime I can find a professionally done adaptation of any of these plays, I'll try and watch those as well to accompany this book. I guess that'll be my new system working through this book. So anyways, I will link to everything in the description down below. Check it out if you wish.